time for the 49ers Rush Podcast. And here's your host, John Chapman.
What is going on, faithful? It is absolutely incredible to be with you guys. Coach Approach is with us, Ant, the man. And here's what I promise you today. Chapman and Ant are going to argue a little bit. We agree too much. It's an issue. We're seeing our marriage therapist, and we need more conflict in this relationship, Ant. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. And I was watching the comments go by, and I seen one that said, gold helmet, green jacket, who gives a hoot? And it just hit me. It's perfect. Yeah, this is going to be a great one. And we are going to have disagreements. There's just no way that me and you could possibly agree on every single draft pick. And I think that's part of the fun because evaluators see things differently. We all get attached to one thing or the other. We're all trying to figure out what the 49ers ultimately want. I think if me and you weren't looking from a 49ers lens, it might even be greatly different in our opinions on certain players. And I think that's what's fun is just having the disagreements and then these players go and prove it. And the one thing we can both agree is we want these players to do really well in the NFL. And you find these guys that you really like and you just cheer for them. And I know that this is going to be a fun conversation because there's some really good players at the top of this draft. And I think you did a really good job going over your top 30 prospects. But there's always going to be guys that we just see landing in different spots. And it's going to be true with this as well.
Yeah, so that's kind of the title of today's show. It's like 49ers gold helmet guys. We're trying to figure out these guys that, again, Invader right here, gold helmet. They're the men with the draft day crush, a Niners hunch, right? I call them my rush crush, right? Like it rhymes, it works, it's all right. But, the 49ers have this demarcation for certain players that are perfect off the field. They have the elite character and competition type whatever. They have production, and they have a clean bill of health. So, like, that's a lot of things. And, a lot of times you don't get those guys because they go early. We're going to talk about some of the guys that we think might fit on this profile. And, yeah, shout out to Vince. Gold jacket, green jacket, who gives a one of my probably top 10 quotes that anytime somebody brings up a color of anything, I say it all the time, and my son laughs, and my wife gets mad at me. It's just kind of the way that it goes. But anyway, smash that like button. I am excited and really appreciate you guys. Look at Mosquito. He says, we're going to need a bigger boat. I want all references all the time to all nostalgia. Just that's all that I want. So let's start off with my man, Mike C. He had this question. And, you're the O-line guy. I'm the we need help at center guy. Here's what he said. Since the biggest weakness after the, changing in coordinators and all this stuff would be center and defensive tackle, why is there no discussion about possibly getting an exceptional center in Zabel? I love Zabel. He's the 30th player on my board. Where would you take him? You don't take him at 11. Do you trade back? Do we trade up? Because I don't think he's going to be there at 43 either. So I had him. He's my 30th player on my big board. We're going to talk about that big board a little bit more later. Dane Brugler had Zabel at 38. Daniel Jeremiah had him at 29. I think Nate Tice had him at 30. So we have like the neighborhood of where he's going to go. What do you think about this? Because now there's rumors out that Drew Dahlman, the Chicago Bears are going hard after him. So, like, the idea of getting Drew Dahlman, that it's less likely today than it was yesterday. So, what are your thoughts on Gray Zabel and kind of where the Niners could – is he even on their radar? And what would be a likely scenario where you could target him?
I think he is on their radar. I mean, he would have to be when you look at just how he played last year. He's got a good height to him. The arm length isn't there, but – for Chris Verster, as long as they have 32-inch arms, they can play guard or center. That's not really an issue when you go to the interior. And so I think he does fit. I think he's probably a little less athletic, than you probably would normally see, but he can get it done. When you watch the film, He's a guy that can still get to his spots. He takes proper angles. He's able to win when he gets to the second level. He's a consistent prospect. He has been flying up. I mean, absolutely flying up boards since the Senior Bowl. And I think that he'll settle in probably to the end of the first round, like you have him at 30. I think that's probably a realistic position for him. It's kind of the same area where Graham Barton was taken last year. The problem is the 49ers aren't picking there this time. Last year, Graham Barton, guys like that made a lot of sense for the 49ers because they were sitting there at the end of the first round. I think he might be in a spot where they just can't get to him. Just because if you trade back, is he enough value at 18, 20? You know, is he, or could you get somebody else that's maybe going to make a bigger impact on your team? I think that the 49ers evaluate interior offensive linemen different, and I'm not sure they would go with an interior offensive lineman in the first round. And that's something that we've all beat our heads against the wall about last year with center prospects, you know, with interior prospects. They just don't do it. And John Lynch's comments about having a player that can play for one contract or a player that can play here for 12 years, I think a lot of times the way that we've seen them handle interior offensive linemen, it is the one contract type people. So I don't know if you use a first round pick on just a one contract player, but I do like him a lot. I think Gray Zabel would be a nice center prospect. In fact, I think he'll play really well at center in the NFL. I just don't know if the 49ers pull the trigger in round one on a center prospect. And I think probably because I've just never seen them do it with this regime.
Yeah, it's hard. It like, again, you talked about Graham Barton went 26th last year. That's the type of player Gray Zabel is. Maybe hasn't played, you know, the same quality of competition, but the versatility and what he did at the Senior Bowl and the athleticism, that's who he is. Jackson Powers Johnson, who had a little bit of a health issue, he went 44. You don't have that with Gray Zabel. Now, the 49ers have passed over, goodness, Cam Jurgens, Creed Humphrey, Zach Frazier, had chances to get elite guys, haven't done that. And then you go back to Chris Forster's kind of philosophy that, hey, if they're not, you know, touching the ball and they're not playmakers and whatever, well, we're going to go for average type guys, which is how you get Creed Humphrey, which is a killer. I'm sorry, not Creed Humphrey. I wish we had Creed Humphrey. It's how you get Jake Brendel. So that's rough. Now, looking at the free agents, you've got Ryan Kelly. He would be my number one. You have Drew Dahlman. I'd be very, very happy with him. He's going to get more money because he's on the up. Austin Corbett, any of those guys. But yeah, so like, do you even think if Gray Zabel was there at pick 43 that the 49ers would be interested?
I think at 43, that makes a lot of sense. I think that would be a position they'd be interested in going interior offensive line. They did it with Aaron Banks, which meant value for a one contract guy in round two. It wasn't priced out. So I do think that they would go with Gray Zabel if he was there. So that is kind of where I see the hotbed of interior offensive line and potential for the 49ers. And there's a lot of guard prospects. There's a lot of center prospects or tackles who could play center in that area. So I do think that that's tremendous value for him. And I think they'd be interested. I even think that, you know, if he got to a certain point in the second round, early on in that second round, they might think about stepping up to get him if they feel like he could be the guy that could play center in Jake, you know, Brendel's place for a while. My question is, how quickly does he do that? Because if you get a center in round two, I love that. But when is he taking over for Jake Brendel? In year one? Is he taking over in year two? If it's year two, you're talking about a 3-year player potentially for your team. So then you have to add that into the equation as well. You're probably going to get 3 years, and then who knows? They might move on from him.
Yeah, I like that. So a lot of people in the chat are talking about, like, okay, if we don't, you know, overpay for Dahlman, is Jared Wilson, athletic freak, center out of Georgia, only 1 year of production? That's kind of the hard part there. Not a lot of experience. Is he an option at 43 or even later? This is probably where I disagree with most people. I would be comfortable taking Jared Wilson at pick 43 in the second round because it means they address the center position. So I'm willing to overpay to overcompensate for the Shanahan/Forster philosophy on offensive line, which I hate. I disagree with incredibly. But would you be willing to wait to see if he does fall to the third or fourth round, which I think a lot of people have him slated going? I don't know. How does Jared Wilson fit into this? And again, keep in mind, you have the Tampa Bay Bucks just lost their center. the Jacksonville Jaguars just lost their center. So not only is the center market getting more of a demand now because Mitch Morse retired, but now you have the Bears with a lot of cap space saying, oh, yeah, we're going to be major players in the center market. So you've got Ryan Kelly, you've got Drew Dahlman, you've got Gray Zabel, maybe Jared Wilson. There's not enough centers to go around. So do you get a little aggressive with that, with this being a weak center class?
I think you can potentially, depending on how free agency plays out. I mean, because there's the chance that a lot of these teams have filled their holes already and they're going into it with fresh eyes. Because when you look at the center prospects in this draft, it's not overflowing with talent. There's a lot of guys that are more mid-round guys. It's day 2 and beyond of guys you can add to your football team and develop. So you're not finding potentially day 1 starters in rounds 2, 3, 4. I think you probably could find one here or there. You have to make sure you hit on the right guy. So I do think teams are evaluating that, and that's why they're being so involved in free agency when going to center. You look at the holes in this draft, and that's one of the positions there's holes. And so I think that he would be available at pick 75, and I think that would be a target for the 49ers because we've seen third round. It seems like a really good spot for them to go interior offensive line, and I think they would potentially address it there. He's super athletic. He can make all the plays, all the blocks. Like you said, lack of experience might also push him down the line a little bit. But I think you see a well-oiled athlete that kind of fits the 49ers mold that could definitely get it done. And pick 75, I think that'd make a lot of sense for the 49ers. They're going to address interior offensive line, guard, center, one of those positions. And it could be 43, 75, depending on who's available.
Okay, well, I want to dive into kind of the top 30 that I put out. And I want to get some arguments, but connecting the center talk to the top 30. One of the players that I just struggled with, I just wanted to keep moving him up, was Donovan Jackson, who I finished with at 18. And I'm just like, man, is that high enough for this guy? So is Donovan Jackson a guy? Shout out to my man Raj. Could he be a viable candidate at center? We've seen him play left tackle. We've seen him play left guard. We've seen him play right guard. Could he be a center prospect for the 49ers?
Absolutely. I don't think there's anything that Donovan Jackson can't do along the offensive line. I mean, we've seen him play left tackle against some of the better edge rushers in the league, and he was an All-American left guard. This guy is extremely talented. If he has the football IQ that if you told him you needed him to pick up center, he could do it. I think Donovan Jackson is one of the can't-miss offensive line prospects in this draft. I am a huge fan of him. I would have him as my top guard in this entire draft. If the 49ers picked him at 11, I wouldn't bat an eye. That's how talented I think he is. I think he's a plug-and-play left guard. I think if you ask him to translate to center, there might be a little bit of a transition period because it's just a whole different thing when you have to have your hand between your leg and you've got to be able to still get off and be able to win your block, especially with a zero tech or someone in your face, or even getting away and getting to the second level without being grabbed. Like there's some real technique that goes into playing center and being consistent with your snaps. But I do think he could do it. And the athletic profile's there, the skill set, the IQ, everything about him. I really like the player, and I do think he's a top 20 worthy pick. The question will be, just like with all things, how many teams are going to value interior offensive line in the top 20? If somebody values it, I think that he's the better prospect than most when it comes to interior offensive line. I like him a lot.
All right. So let's talk about what you don't like. This is what we gotta focus on this. So my top 30, I did a full top 30 episode. I'm going to give you top 10 names. And so for the audio listeners trying to paint a better picture because they can't see the list, obviously. So I have Abdul Carter 1, Travis Hunter 2, Mason Graham 3, Ashton Genty 4, Armand Membu 5, Cam Ward 6, Jahdae Barron 7, Jahad Campbell 8, Tet McMillan 9, Kelvin Banks 10. Tell me where I got it wrong, Ant. I love this discourse. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think the one that jumps off at me is I think Armand Membu being 5. I think that, right now he does have a rocket strapped to his back and he's flying up boards. But, this is a guy who at the beginning of the process was thought of as an early second round pick. And then all of a sudden he was a middle of the first round. And now with his scores at the combine, he's all the way up to top 5. And I think that this is kind of a consensus. I don't think you're out on your own on this. I've heard it around that Armand Membu could go as high as the Patriots at 4. And if you think he's the top tackle prospect, well, that makes sense. I just don't think he's the top tackle prospect. I think that he's really good. I think he's consistent. But when I look at him, I see a guy that even to go to left tackle would have to be able to work on switching sides. And I get it. He played some on the left side when he ran a lot of run blocking, but that's run blocking. That's not pass protection. It's different. And I think going against some of these elite pass rushers, he does have a couple of holes. One thing that I've noticed with him is he does flatten out when he's in his kick slide. He'll flatten out and allow them to be able to work inside. He oversets sometimes. Those are things that are going to be problems against a guy like Myles Garrett or a guy that has that extreme power to go with speed combination. I think that when you're looking at the blind side offensive tackle, that could be a little bit of an issue. But do I like the prospect? Yes, I do. I think he's a very talented guy. And I think that if you told me he was going to go between picks 11 and 20, I would say that's a perfect spot for Armand Membu. So I know we're splitting hairs when talking about him as a top 10 prospect, but I still like guys like Will Campbell and Kelvin Banks a little bit more. I think the only thing that's concerning about Will Campbell has got to be the arm length, where I think Kelvin Banks has upside to play left tackle, and we've seen him do it, and I think that he still translates well to being left tackle in the NFL.
Yeah, that's it's so like I think that this is a little bit of kind of a microcosm of this draft. Like, if not Armand Membu at 5, who should be there? And I don't think that there's a big difference between Armand Membu who have at 5 and Kelvin Banks who have at 10. It's just, man, there are fewer questions on Membu. And then you brought up Will Campbell, freaking awesome. Willie Lampkin, who's 5'10", has longer arms than Will Campbell does. Like, he'd be the first tackle to ever do it with those measurables. Not saying he can't, but I have dropped him down based on his measurements. Does the film show that? Yeah, arm issue's a little bit of a length. I think the best tackle who I have at number 17 is Josh Simmons, but that dude's coming off a patella tear. So, like, I don't think that there's that big of a difference in my list, the tiered ranking, right? When you do 1 through 30, like, you have to say this player or that player. But if you wanted to put, I don't know, Will Campbell's 13, if you wanted to put him at 5 and swap him and Membu, I don't really have that much of a like, yeah, but somebody's got to be there. And you keep going back to that. The pick at 5 is not much different than the pick at 26 in this draft. They are relatively comparable. You're getting different players, different positions, and whatever, at different skill sets. But it was almost like, it's almost like musical chairs. Like, players at the combine and health stuff and character stuff, like, they're just getting the chair pulled out from them. And sometimes it's kind of last man standing. And that's where Armand Membu is. What are the flaws? You talked about the kick slide, flatten it out, all that stuff. But man, his footwork, whew, like, I feel comfortable betting that Membu could play left tackle because of how athletic he is. He has the arm length. It's difficult, and you have to kind of set up these bifurcations between the different players to try to sort them. And this isn't even my list. Like, Daniel Jeremiah, I haven't even looked at his list, but he just put out his 3rd top 50 list. Things change the more tape you go through. So let's go to the second tier. Let's do 11 through 20. 11, I have James Pierce Jr., 12, Colston Loveland, 13, Will Campbell, 14, Tyler Warren, 15, Malachi Starks, 16, Matthew Golden, 17, Josh Simmons, 18, Donovan Jackson, 19, Tyler Booker, 20, my defensive tackle number 2, Derek Harmon. Give me one that you're just like, don't really disagree here.
Yeah, it's interesting in this kind of category because there's probably one guy that stands out, and I do think he's a really good player, so this kind of pains me, but I think he's going to fall farther into the end of the first round because of some of the testing, and that's Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia. I like the player a lot. I like the versatility. He can play in the nickel. He can make a lot of plays. But I think when I was watching him on film, I was seeing a guy that I didn't quite know all the time what he was going to play in the NFL. Was he going to be able to play safety in the NFL, or was he going to play more of a nickel role? And I think with that, if you have question marks about the fit within your defense, you start questioning whether he's worthy of a potential top 15 pick. And I think that's what we're getting with Malachi Starks. Nobody questions the fact that he can make plays. He's a baller. But I do think people will have question marks about where he fits. And then I think some of the athletic profile could be questionable. But he was so fast in his W drill. He was so fast in his drills that you still love the prospect. I just think he slips a little bit from where he was, and you have him at 15. So I think even you have him slipping a little bit compared to what a lot of people had him as a top 10 prospect. And I think that's what we're going to see from Malachi Starks. And I think a big reason why is because you're looking for elite traits at safety now with some of the safeties that have been coming in the league recently. I'm not sure Malachi Starks shows that. Into first round makes a lot of sense. Early second round, a ton of sense. And I think that's where we're going to see him slip a little bit.
My biggest regret after, like, I put it out there and was like, tell me what your thoughts are. And I, on social media, my biggest issue is the gap I currently have between Malachi Starks at 15 and then Nick Emanwari at 28. Like, I don't want to flip them, but I want Malachi Starks down more, and I want Nick Emanwari higher. So let me ask you this. Just on this list, Malachi Starks at 15. If you could drag and drop him on this list, would he fall all the way off? Or would you move him back to 20, 25, 30, or off completely? If you had to, like, you're in charge. Hey, Ant, you're the GM. Where do we slot Malachi Starks? What's your thought?
Yeah, I think I would put him somewhere right now in that 22 to 25 range. That's kind of like where I see him. I do like him a lot. I think that's where you're getting into some of those guys, right? Jalen Walker, the same thing. Is this guy a scheme fit as a linebacker, an off-ball linebacker in the NFL, or is he an edge guy? I think makes a lot more sense for a 3-4 defense, because then you don't really have those questions. You play him outside linebacker, he rushes sometimes, he's in coverage sometimes. Tremendous athlete. But the guys that you start having question marks about their fits, but they've got a lot of potential, I think those guys have to be towards the end of the first round, because you're drafting on traits, you're drafting on potential, and they're going to fit certain schemes. They got a certain niche that's going to work. It means they're still great players, but it does mean that they're not going to have as many teams available to them. Not all 32 teams are going to have them fitting their defense. And so I think those guys kind of make sense in that type of area with Malachi Starks. And when it comes to Nick Emanwari, I would have him ahead of Malachi Starks. I'm one of those guys that's been an Emanwari guy. So the testing didn't really surprise me. I knew he was going to test, crazy. I thought he was a first-round guy before. I just think he cemented himself potentially as a top 20 pick now, which probably makes him irrelevant for the 49ers, because I don't think they take him at 11, maybe a trade back situation. It would have to be Robert Saleh and Gus Bradley falling in love with them for them to go 11. To me, that doesn't make sense. So I think he actually took himself out of the 49ers running, and now it could be crazy. What if Malachi Starks is actually the guy because he slips a little bit and becomes available closer to 43 and they could trade up and go get him?
There we go. And I like this comment. We're going to the second half of this show is going to be revolved around this, but I think it fits with what we're talking now. Vince says, a lot of time gold helmet guys are leaders in the community as well. Are there any of those guys that are Walter Payton man type of the years? And, you keep bringing up Nick Emanwari. All throughout his draft profile research and all the things that the 49ers rush team does, that dude is a A+ off the field type guy. And so leadership and character and community development and all those different things, that's kind of who he is. So talking about these guys that kind of fit that, also Hairston, the corner out of Kentucky, another guy that has vocally and put time in and made that who he is. So those guys do exist. And it's hard to slate, like, okay, for example, we have Mike Green on this list. The way I build out my draft board, the 49ers rush kind of big board, because we do it vertical stacking, then horizontal. So these are all of our first round players, and you can kind of look at that, and we give that out to all of our Patreon and the 49ers rush subscribers, but we flag them red, character stuff, right? Yellow, medical or character stuff. Green, no experience, all this kind of different stuff. Whether it's right or wrong, and he did it or he didn't do it, that's not what we're interested in. It's, man, this is a character. There's issues here. Not one, but two major sexual whatever accusations. The 49ers met with them. So, like, do you, Anthony, whenever you're building out your kind of big board and rankings, do you drop players for injuries and off the field things, or do you just slate them where the film says and flag them kind of like what we do? How do you handle that?
Yeah, I've started kind of I will drop guys depending on what it is. If it's a major injury, just the way that the 49ers handle things, I try to be as close to what they do as possible. And so I will drop them a little bit. There's certain positions, if I don't think the 49ers are going to target it, I will take them completely off the board. But with the concerns about things off the field, I think it's a little bit more complicated because we don't know the inner workings of these things, especially if a guy hasn't been charged with any sort of a crime. There's really nothing there as far as what we can tell on the public level. I think they're going to get more of the information from inside, from talking to the player, also from talking to the former coach. They can get really good insight if these things are true, what really happened, what's the story, because without that, we just don't have any context. So you have to leave them there. So even though, like in my conversations, when I talk about players for the 49ers, I have cooled on Mike Green because I think there's question marks there. I can't say for sure the 49ers wouldn't take him if they felt comfortable that the off-season or off-field issues weren't real issues to them. So even though I think it's less likely, I just think that we don't know for sure. And there's no way we could possibly know because there's no public record that says this guy committed any sort of a crime.
Yeah, there's no allegation. Like, there were accusations, but no legal anything. But I do think that it matters where you are. It being a city, San Francisco, it's a little bit different. And Shaw says, imagine Mike Green answering questions on his character at his initial press conference. Well, there's teams where if he gets drafted by the Chiefs, they don't care about that there. They just honestly is not an issue. They have literally, he could talk to 15 players on their own team that have gone through that. The Cowboys, there's just teams that just don't care. San Francisco is not one of those cities/teams. It really, and the Reuben Foster issue and all that stuff, you haven't touched anybody else with that. But the nuanced take here, why would the 49ers spend one of 30 official visits talking to this player if it wasn't at least in the back of their mind? So that's something they're weighing on. This is something that the 49ers have to figure out and what they're comfortable with. What that looks like, that's not what we're here to decide, but we are here to make you aware that these things are out there. We're not a jury. We're not those things, but what do you do with those types of guys? I think Ant put it very, very well. Let's get to the last 10. 21 on my list, I have Mikael Williams, which we have some complaints about from Chad. I want to talk about Mikael Williams. 22, Walter Nolan. 23, Will Johnson. I'm lower on him than most. 24, Mike Green. 25, Jalen Walker. 26, Kenneth Grant. 27, Egbuka. 28, Iman Wari. We talked about 29, Omari and Hampton, and 30, Grayson Bell. We talked about. So let's start off with Chad. He says Mikael Williams, way too high. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think this is going into the Mikael Williams being too stiff. I think when you see him on film, you don't see the fluid athlete you see with a lot of the other edge rushers. And so you wonder if he's more than a 5-tech in the NFL. I think if he played a 5-tech, he would do a really good job. Very consistent when it comes to, taking on blockers and being able to shed. But I haven't been able to see a guy that I think has the ankle and hip flexibility to be able to bend a corner and flatten. And that's one of the keys. There's a lot of guys who can bend the corner, but can they flatten the corner and get to the quarterback? I don't really know if Mikael Williams is that guy. I haven't been able to see it, and I haven't seen the traits that show me that he can. So he's a little bit stiffer. He's good at setting the edge against the run. I think he would do well there. But that's why I've had him somewhat kind of slide down. I know that he was really hot early, and he's starting to kind of slow down. I think when he does his pro day, he'll probably move up some boards a little bit when he starts showing some of his. He's still a freak athlete, but we're literally talking about little tiny things. But this is just the case, and I do think that this is kind of where he should go. It's interesting because he's a talented guy. I just don't know if he fits the wide 9, and that's why he's been sliding on my board. But I love the player. I love him for other teams. I just don't really love him for the 49ers, and that's kind of my lens all the time. So that's why I would have him slide down.
Okay. So, and let me just say, you look at this group, Mikael Williams played injured, got questions. Will Johnson, major injuries, business decisions in the run game questions. Mike Green, off-field questions. Jalen Walker, questions on where he fits and what his actual position is. Kenneth Grant's awesome, but he's a first and second down player only. And then I get to Emeka Egbuka. And just as I'm saying that, him and Nick Imanwari are like the two misfits of this group because Emeka's clean. There's no questions to his game. He's an elite route runner with high IQ, can play every single wide receiver position. He's just consistent. He's just not the elite athlete. And I know you like Egbuka probably more than I do. So talk about, I have Matthew Golden 16, Egbuka 27. How do you like that? You don't like that, do you?
No, I think that you could flip those guys. I do think that Golden is a solid player. I mean, everything that I've seen from him, you throw the speed on top. He's a guy that can stretch you vertically. He can run all the routes. There's not a lot to dislike. I just like Ibuka a little bit more when it comes to some of the things he does against zone coverage. He's really comfortable sitting down. He presents himself well. He can make plays with yards after the catch. But he looks like a professional wide receiver already. He's a guy you plug him in as your number 2 wide receiver, and he goes out there and he makes, 55 to 60 catches right off the bat and makes an impact on your football team. And eventually he's that guy that's that Robin to whoever you got as that number 1. And you can count on him to play any position and do anything you want and to do it well. And that's the one thing I've heard of everything I've read out of him from Ohio State is how much of a professional he comes off as, the way he carries himself. Everything is good. I love the prospect. I don't think he's elite in any category. So it's not like, a Tet McMillan or one of those guys that's going to, change the game. But if you're talking about consistency and making plays and being a 55, to 70 catch guy that can get, 800 yards a season, I think he's that guy.
Yeah. I don't like scouting uniforms, but what they do at the wide receiver position at Ohio State matters. And whenever, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 wide receivers that have success at the next level, but it's like almost all of them. I think that kind of translates. And so I have no problem. This is a weird wide receiver class. But yeah, I have no issues if you wanted to move him up and just even looking at this list. I'm like, man, I think he's a little bit cleaner prospect than a lot of the people that he's in that neighborhood with, and I don't like that. Now, we're going to transition to the gold helmet conversation, rush crush, whatever you want to delineate those guys. And I want you to throw into the chat, who do you think are some of the prospects that the 49ers would have a gold helmet kind of demarcation for? And we're going to get to that right after this. If you're serious about sports betting, you need a sports book that actually works for you, and that's why I use MyBookie. I've been working with them for over 5 years now. And MyBookie, you're in control. Better odds, better wins, less hassle than other guys, with the biggest selection of player bets and prop bets. Early cash out options, live betting lets you jump in at any time. So if you miss it before tip-off or game time starts, guess what? You get to play your way. Whether you're locking in picks pregame, riding the action live, MyBookie makes sure you always have access to the action. It's not just sports. MyBookie hosts the party that never ends with full-fledged casino. They've got everything from blackjack, roulette, video poker, slots, you name it. So if you're new to MyBookie, sign up now with promo code 49ERS or use this QR code next to me. Get a deposit bonus up to $2,000. Remember, gambling's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's all about building up your funds over time. Don't settle for second-rate book. Bet smarter, win bigger, only at MyBookie. All right, gold helmet players. These are just perfect fits, on, off, you name it. I call them rush crush guys. So what's your demarcation that you use, Ant, for these types of guys? Are they just Ants guys? We need like an alliteration or something.
Yeah, I used to call them star players for me. Like I would give them a star, and that meant they were the perfect fit for the 49ers. They were the, athletic profile. They were the player that had the best, off the field. Like those were guys that were star players for me. I didn't really do anything with that last year. In the draft process, I got completely swallowed by seeing 350 plus prospects and was like, I'm not doing that. But I do put little stars next to guys. If I give them a check mark, it means they fit the 49ers scheme. The tape says, hey, this is a guy that could be a 49ers prospect. But if I put a star, it means this is a 49ers prospect I think they're going to draft. There were 2 guys that stood out last year, Renardo Green, Dominic Pooney. They would be considered star players for me. So just to give you an idea, that's kind of where I was going. I did love Pearsall, but I did not have him going in the first round.
Yeah, I did not either. And yeah, I mean, how cool was it when you get that like star sticker? I didn't get a lot of those because I was I didn't get a lot of. I was a bad kid. Was past tense. I don't know why I'm saying past tense. Still a bad kid. I haven't grown up at all. But yeah, it was cool. Whatever it happened, didn't happen much. But the class clown. That's who I was. I was like, all right, if I'm not going to get the star, I'm going to get the chuckles from the pretty girls. I'm going to make them laugh. And so that was my route. And here we are, way too many years later. Kawachipto says Chris Paul. This is off-ball linebacker from Ole Miss. And, was at Arkansas for a long time. So you're getting a lot of those Dre Greenlaw comparisons. And, man, awesome dude. It just nickname Pooh. Come on, man. Let's go. But Niners have met with him. And just a clean player on and off the field. Production at not one, but 2 SEC schools. He's got the experience. He's got the production. I do think that this is a player that, I've got to do some more research, could definitely fall into there. Now, I got to disagree here with Big Dez. I am a huge James Pierce Jr. guy, but there has been so many people out there talking about how committed is he to football, what is work ethic, practice habits, all that stuff's out there. They met with him. I doubt that James Pierce Jr. gets that. Again, I'm not saying those are true. I'm not saying they're not true. I'm saying they're out there. What are your thoughts with James Pierce Jr.? Because I would love for the 49ers to take him at 11. I think he's a perfect scheme fit. But what do you do whenever these guys have rumors out there about work ethic?
Yeah, I think those are types of things that would make a player a non-gold helmet guy. And really, the 49ers are very selective with who their gold helmet guys are, and it has to be the absolute cream of the crop. And sometimes they don't even draft a gold helmet guy. It just doesn't work out. I don't think James Pierce would be considered a gold helmet guy just from the rumors and the conversation that's going on about, his college experience, some of the things that happened, some of the questions of work ethic. Now, they'll have a better understanding by talking to the coach, talking to the training staff, talking to other players. You get Omar Norman-Lott in a meeting and you say, hey, what about James Pierce? What did you like? Was he a good teammate? We've heard that Omar Norman-Lott said some good things about James Pierce, but I do think that he would not be in that category, and I know how selective they are. He wouldn't be in my category either, but if you're talking about just play on the field, he fits. I mean, this guy's a talented guy when it comes to one of these elite players that can make an impact on your football team. So I still think he's an option for the 49ers, but I don't think they would put a gold helmet on him.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And this one I was hoping somebody would bring up. He's on my list. Demetrius Knight Jr. at linebacker, but it won't happen. Why will it not happen? Great one. Leadership. He runs the defense. You're talking about somebody that two-time captain in high school, captain, in the SEC. He won the Joe Morrison MVP on defense. 3-time ACC honor roll, degree in literature, media communication. He's already got 2 kiddos. And they talked about this on the combine. DoorDash all during the season while playing full-time football and a full-time student. Like, this guy is just, oh, man, off the charts. I feel like if the Niners did go linebacker in the 3rd round, Demetrius Knight would be the perfect fit. I really, really do like this guy. Thoughts on Demetrius Knight and kind of what he offers?
Yeah, I like Demetrius Knight a lot. I actually have him ranked above Chris Paul. I think that those two guys are very talented. But with Knight, you're getting a guy that can absolutely destroy you. I mean, this guy hits a ton. He flies around. He makes plays. I'm a big fan of him. I do think in the 3rd round, that would be a hotbed for the 49ers to go potential linebacker and a potential replacement for Dre Greenlaw whenever that happens, whether that's this season or in the future. I think they do have some talented guys, but Knight would definitely be one of those guys. And I think when you just see the transition that he made in college, yet, I mean, the play just got better and better as he went from Georgia Tech to playing at South Carolina. He's a very talented guy. I like him a lot. Watching that South Carolina film is a lot of fun. There's some talented defenders over there, and so he was one of those.
Yeah, he's freaking awesome. Now this one, again, I appreciate. I'm glad that there's some consensus. I just put a Carson Swessiger film breakdown and Femi Oladejo up on our Patreon, and dude, Carson Swiss is the man. From walk-on to team captain, freaking bioengineering major. Are you freaking kidding me? At UCLA, was at Cal, then went to UCLA. I think it was 8-time athletic directors honor roll in the Pac-12. It's not the Pac-12 anymore. I don't know, whatever you call it. Whatever, I don't care. But I love this dude. From walk-on to team captain, Buck Kiss Award finalist, and yes. Watch Carson Switzer. Now, the problem is you got 1 year. This dude sat on the bench for 3 years. Special teams stud. Tape says second round. Niners usually value experience, but man, Swiss is the man. I freaking you just watch him and it's like he reminds. I shouldn't say this. You see like a white try-hard linebacker and you're just like, oh, who was the Miami Dolphins all-time leading tackler out of Texas Tech? I hate Texas Tech. Yeah, he just got in the freaking thing. Gosh, this is pissing me off. Yes, somebody help me out. He's I'm
Zach
mad
Thomas?
now. I see it
Is it?
I don't know
Thomas?
if he's Zach Thomas. Thank you. The chat's blowing up. I hate Texas Tech. I try to repeat. And my joke always is, if you can't get your grades up, get your guns up, baby. That's the Texas thing. That's where. But with Carson Switzer, he fits that kind of mold, and I don't really like all of those things if you're looking at. But gosh, man, that dude, you just watch him again. I was trying to do a Femi Oladejo film breakdown, but I couldn't stop looking at number 49. He wears jersey number 49, which is an ugly ass jersey, but he was a walk-on, so he didn't get to pick his number, and he just stuck with it. Give me some Carson Swissinger. Where do you fit him on your linebacker skill?
Yeah, I think he's kind of a little bit in that range with Knight and Paul. I think those guys are kind of close together into round 2, beginning of round 3, kind of there. I think when you look at him, the first thing you're thinking is he doesn't have a lot of film. He doesn't have a lot of things to break down, but there's some things that you really like about him. I love his blitzing ability. I think that he's one of those guys that, coming from that second level can put a lot of pressure on a quarterback, and that is kind of moving more and more into the NFL game. They're doing it more to generate pressure on the quarterback. I think he's got the necessary size, 6'2", over 240 pounds. I think there's a lot of potential, and I think into round 2, round 3, you are drafting guys for potential you think you could develop into even more, and I think he's a solid tackler. He's a guy that plays with good instincts. He's long enough. So, yeah, I like him in that range. I think he would be a great pick, especially if he got anywhere near 75. That's one of those ones you're a huge fan of potentially getting him because, like you said, all the things make sense. The intelligence, the IQ, the instincts, the body type, the ability. He's a fun prospect.
Yeah, and I like this. Silent says, too soft, not an enforcer. Him and Demetrius Knight are going to go in similar places. Not the same player. Same position. Great guys. No. One of them arrives to kill you, and one of them is just a tackling sideline to sideline, always does what he's supposed to do. Great coverage guy, good blitzer, but he ain't Dre Greenlaw. Knight is closer. If you're looking for the Dre Greenlaw, we want that exact thing, that's not what Carson Swiss is. That's not what he is. Zach Thomas wasn't that. So do you value the guy that's going to knock somebody out and put fear into other players? No, that's not Swiss. So where that fits, I don't know how you want to do that. I don't know where that fits, but yeah, that's there. Another guy I want to bring up is Jacob Parrish, Kansas State. Athleticism, size, attitude, met with the 49ers at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine. So you're not talking about not one, but 2 meetings. I mean, you're talking, wish he had a little bit more experience, but the play style comp for him, it's Diamador Lenore. And I don't like using a lot of 49ers players, but my athletic comp for him is a smaller Bill Bates. You remember Bill, we're going back 90s now. This dude, now Bill Bates was just a special teamer and, spot safety, but then I'm telling you, Jacob Parrish fits. If you want that thumper, that enforcer, all those different things, I really think that Jacob Parrish is a guy out of K-State, which, if you play at K, if you've ever been to Manhattan, freaking Kansas, that place sucks. You have to be tough. You have to be tough to be. I'm crapping on Manhattan right now, but that place is what you're just dry. I've been to so many games there. I went to grad school in Kansas City, Missouri. So when Texas played there, I always went. You're just driving. There's nothing but cows. And you go over this little tiny hill, and then there's just a college right there. And right next to the field is it's just cows and goats. Like, it's out in the middle of nowhere. So it's an interesting spot. What do you think about Jacob Parrish?
Yeah, I mean, this is a fun guy. You're not getting anything as far as measurables, right? He's not gonna be the tallest guy. He's not the biggest guy, but he will absolutely hit you. He's a dog, and he goes after the football. He makes plays on the football, and he's able to do everything you need to do. He's able to come up and make tackles. He's able to get physical with receivers. He's a really good player, and I think that's where you're going to find tremendous value when you get to the middle part of this draft. I think Parrish would add a lot to the 49ers team, and I think he could step in, to a nickel role. If you're looking to translate Deommodore Lenoir consistently to the outside, I think Parrish could play on the interior, and I think that would be a fun guy because he's got that same mentality that Deommodore Lenoir has. He's more of a pit bull where Deommodore Lenoir is a hyena, but they go get it. And I think the undersized nature doesn't bother them because they play bigger than their stature. And I think he's a really good player, and I think where he's going to go would make sense for the 49ers.
Yeah. Just I hate, and this is another reason why I'm lower on Will Johnson than probably consensus. That dude makes business decisions consistently this past year. You'll see an outside run or a pile, and that dude's shuffling his feet backwards. He's got his palms out like this, trying to stop from anybody getting close to his legs instead of going in there and getting involved. Like, I understand Will Johnson's probably the most common mocked player to the 49ers at 11 from NFL media sources. And I'm just like, that dude don't fit. He don't fit. Maybe I'm way wrong, but like, that is one player that is like, if you, and I hate to say this because I'm not trying to tear him down. He's going to go, and there are teams that just don't care if you're not a physical corner. The 49ers are not one of those. And you talk about the injuries, you talk about the play style, the athleticism's there and the coverage is there, but he's like the opposite of a gold helmet guy. So I just, maybe that's one of those just curveballs. Chapman's just missing it completely. But whenever I look at Will Johnson and then I look at Jacob Parrish, it's like, man, this guy is a Niner. This guy, tell me I'm crazy. Tell me I know I'm crazy, but tell me I'm crazy because of this.
No, I don't think you are. I think the 49ers do value the more physical corner, and I think that it's bit them in the butt a little bit when you talk about guys like Akilla Witherspoon or Ambry Thomas, who you thought maybe could play up to that physicality level, and then they didn't. And then all of a sudden, your force defender is not getting anything done on the outside. He's giving up ground, and you're giving up big yards on the outside. I also think it hurt him with screens and things like that. So I don't think you're crazy to think that. I think the 49ers are going to value physicality. And I think one of the interesting dynamics is going to be Robert Saleh coming back in because he had Sauce Gardner. And Sauce Gardner does not like the physicality part of stopping the run either. And I wonder what his thoughts would be on Will Johnson, who is somewhat in that category as far as non-physicality, but a really good cover guy. I wonder if Robert Saleh says, you know what, no, I want guys like Reed. I want guys like, Deommodore Lenoir. I want the physical guys that set the tone. And I think that's probably what he's going to go with. So I think Will Johnson, national media-wise, makes a lot of sense for the 49ers because I see Charvarius Ward going. But Charvarius Ward's a guy that can make a tackle, too, and come up and be physical. And I think that's the missing part for Will Johnson.
Yeah, I agree. Right here, Luke. Saleh mentioned he wanted more speed at safety. I had a very difficult time not leading off with this player. He is my most gold star, gold helmet, rush crush, whatever you want to call it. 4.45 in the 40-yard dash. Andrew Makuba, hook 'em, call me Texas bias. I don't give a damn. This dude fits everything that the 49ers are. He offers everything that the 49ers need at the back half, that you get maybe in the third round. Shout out to my man, Ben. He put this together. QBR allowed from safeties, okay? And it's not even close. The leader of all the safeties is Andrew Makuba with a 12.1 QBR. Xavier Watts is second with a 33. Malachi Moore, 51. And it goes on and on and on and on and on from there. But then, not only is he great against QBR, then you look at just the percentage of snaps that he has at the high safety spot. He's second. Shiloh Sanders is the only one with an 82% share, but you have Andrew Makuba with a 71% share. So you've got speed, you've got experience, you have play style. Xavier McKinney is the type of player that I think that he is. It's very, very high praise. Experience, versatility. He's a 9 out of 10 on both. Like, this guy has everything. Hard hitter, tone setter, versatility, speed, ball production. I just freaking love this dude. Andrew Makuba is a perfect fit gold helmet guy. Thoughts?
Yeah, I like the prospect too. I think Andrew Makuba is a plug and play, guy ready to play safety for the 49ers. I think he's a perfect fit for what they want to do. I love him being able to walk into the slot and cover a wide receiver. I've seen those skills on display. If you want to see those skills, you can see them with Andrew Makuba. He's a talented guy, and I think it's crazy sometimes that I see him going as in the third round. I think this is a second round player. I just think he's really talented. I think the four speed showed that he had enough speed to be a deep third guy. He can cut the field in half if you need him to, but there's a lot of versatility. And we hear John Lynch talk about versatility all the time. This is a versatile guy, and he can do a lot of things. And I think the 49ers want to be more multiple with their defense, and I think he would give them the versatility to be able to do so. So I think this would be a dynamite selection. You talked about all the things that Makuba is really good at. You've seen him play probably more than anyone. And I thought that just from what I've seen from him, I went back and watched Clemson film. I went and watched some Texas film. I'm a big fan. This was probably the most mocked safety for me to the 49ers for a long time. And I think he still makes sense now.
Yeah. Again, you talking about off the field, he detailed his journey to Zimbabwe, where, his family's from and all that stuff. Physical culture and sports major. Dude's all about football. Shows on tape. It's very, very difficult to find something where it's like, oh, I wish he did this better. And, shout out to Kawachipto, who, man, that dude knows his stuff. He says Xavier McKinney is a 4.65 40. Yeah, but the play style's there. You mean to tell me he's 0.2 of a second faster than the 40? That's not a negative. How early. Safeties go late. We talked about Malachi Starks. And, here's where I get stuck is because I'm like, man, I would rather have Makuba than Malachi Starks. But mainly because I think the 49ers issue is free safety. I think most teams covet the nickel cover corner, which I think Malachi Starks is. We call him a safety, but I feel like the versatility with Makuba and Nick Eman way better. So this is something that I'm struggling with. And then Billy Bowman, he's another speed guy. Love him, tough, mean as hell, and really, really high on Billy Bowman. He has some issues in his game. Let me pull this up because I want to talk about this. I'll let you go first. Tell me about Billy Bowman, kind of your thoughts on him first.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just had a question about Billy Bowman the other day because I took him in a mock, and I like to take guys that are going to present conversation points. I kind of do it that way. So that way we can talk about players around and then the actual player. And with Bowman, the interesting question is, do you really draft somebody that has arms that are 29 inches long? This guy, when you're talking about things, I mean, these are the bottom 1 percentile when it comes to wingspan, when it comes to arm length. He's a baller, though. I mean, the guy makes plays. I'm not worried about his height. I'm not worried about his speed. I'm not worried about his size. But I wonder what happens with a receiver that has a good catch radius. How is he going to match up with a tight end? The part that got me was, let's imagine him on Colson Loveland down the middle of the seam, and Colson Loveland reaches up with that catch radius and just snags it from him because he doesn't have the size. It's crazy, but Bowman does have a nose for the football. He finds himself in the right place at the right time a lot, but I do worry about those matchups against tight ends and against bigger wide receivers and even some running backs that could give him some real problems, and that's why I think even if you took Billy Bowman, this is a guy that's later in the draft now. I think he's probably no higher than 4th round, even though he's got the speed, he's got the athletic ability because of the length and some of those concerns.
Yeah, he's faster. 4.42. He's faster than Makuba. But my problem with Billy Bowman, the tape is fun. The highlights are incredible. His missed tackle rate's off the chart. He's got 23% missed tackle rate. You look at his QBR allowed. Here's that same chart. He's in the middle, 79 QBR. Makuba 12, right? You look at the safety alignment. He does fit that. Over 50% of his snaps, 53 are in that high safety alignment. So if you're wanting speed, all those things, he's tough. He's awesome. Leadership's great. But man, whenever, like you said, small arms, not a great tackler. I mean, he's a mean tackler, not a consistent tackler is probably the better way to say it. So you're talking missed tackles. You got that in Jair Brown. He's a missed tackle king. And you talk about high QBR and all that stuff and high percent, He's got that too. I like him. And if you're going to wait on safety till day 3 and you want to take a 5th round safety as opposed to a 2nd or 3rd round safety, cool. But it's like, man, we got that in Jair Brown. You want to bring somebody in to compete with them and just throw a 6th round pick at it, cool. Billy Bowman probably going to go sooner than that. But the production wasn't there. And that's kind of where I kind of walked down like, man, I like Billy Bowman. But again, he's the Will Campbell of safeties. Like, what happened to your arms? Like, what are you doing? You little T-Rex going on there. You don't pick how you're built, but it presents issues, to say the least. So I know we didn't get to anybody. Is there anybody else, Ant, that you're just like, this is a gold star type guy that we didn't bring up?
Yeah, I think Jihad Campbell. That dude is just the epitome of a 49ers guy. I think that I really like him a lot, and I know you had him in the top 10, and that is where I have been kind of putting him in that top 20. And I said, what happened at the Combine? It didn't move Jihad Campbell up for me. It just confirmed what I already thought. And Jihad Campbell, Nick Emenwari have been guys I've been saying now are top 20 picks, and I think they are. And to me, this is the number 1 off-ball linebacker in the entire draft, and I don't think it's really close. I think there's some things you can question about him when it comes to maybe he's more reactive than instinctive when it comes to reading things. But some of that could be comfort. Some of that could be the scheme. And I think if you're able to play free, sometimes you do better. But when you're talking about a guy that matches a lot of the build of Fred Warner, this is it. 6'3", 235 pounds, long arms, the guy that can cover in space, can rush the passer. There's a lot of upside there. I really like Jihad Campbell a lot. And so I think that he's one of the guys that's an epitome of a 49ers guy.
Hey, I'm going to keep saying this. Like, I think he'd be my number 1 off-ball linebacker the past 3 years. Like, I'm putting him over Edgerrin Cooper, over Jack Campbell. I don't think that those guys are close. And Jack Campbell went 18th. The NFL is kind of, I don't know. I don't even know if we can say this after the contract Zach Bond got. Again, would have been my vote for Defensive Player of the Year. So there's value there. Now, the problem is whenever you already have Fred Warner, he's 29 years old. Fred's not going anywhere, folks. Is it worth the number 11 pick or trading back a little bit to invest in your number 2 off-ball linebacker? Is that appropriate for whenever you're allocating your draft resources? Would you do that, Ant? If he's there at 11, are you...
I would now. I think if Dre Greenlaw, especially if Dre Greenlaw moves on, and you've got a potential to plug and play a guy for 5 years, I get it. It's pick 11. It'd probably be high for a lot of people for an off-ball linebacker, but you're talking 5 years. That's going to take Fred Warner into his early 30s and time for a transition probably for Jihad Campbell to move into Mike linebacker and take over as the Fred Warner type player, for another contract. And I think if you're looking at transitioning and thinking ahead, that would make a lot of sense. You're talking about a guy that's pretty good in coverage. He's got the ability. I mean, in the short term, right, you'd rather have Dre Greenlaw. You'd rather have that tandem together. But in the long term, I mean, that could get Fred Warner through probably the end of his career or pretty close to the end of his career. And then Jihad Campbell steps in as the guy for the 49ers, and they just rinse and repeat with another linebacker that steps in next to him in the future. And that's one of those things that John Lynch is talking about. These 12-year guys, compared to these, 1 contract guys. I think Jihad Campbell could be a 12-year guy for the San Francisco 49ers.
Yeah, you remember John Lynch talked about just at the Combine. He's like, are we looking for somebody that's a 12-year guy, or are we looking for a 1 contract guy? I am a betting man. I almost said I'm not a bet man, but if I was, I am a betting man. Played blackjack last night on my phone. But Jihad Campbell's safe. He's great. He's dynamic. Pass rush upside. Best off-ball coverage linebacker. It's hard. He's the number 8 player on my board. Now, does the position versatility, the trenches are way more important in my opinion. But gosh, this off-ball linebacker draft is awful. I think it's a really bad class. And again, it goes back to this supply and demand. Off-ball linebackers suck in this draft. So you get one of those early. Defensive tackle, which is a bigger need, you can get the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th round to be fine. So does the scarcity play into which positions you target, players you target early? I kind of hope they do. I kind of hope that they do. And what is up with the 49ers cutback? What is coming up on your schedule that we can check out on your channel?
Yeah, so tomorrow I am going to put out a video called Draft Doppelgangers. And I'm going to be talking about players that have similar traits that you can find. Maybe one guy's in round 1 and one guy's in round 3, or vice versa. I got this idea because last year I thought Graham Barton and Dominic Pooney were very similar players. Just one was in first round, one was in the third round. And I kept saying Dominic Pooney is Graham Barton, but in the third round. And I think that this will be a lot of fun to get to talk about those players that have similar traits. But hey, if you don't hit them in round 1, you can find someone, maybe they're not quite as good, but they have similarities you can hit in round 2, round 3, round 4. I thought it'd be a kind of a fun process. So that's what I'm doing. Draft doppelgangers tomorrow.
I'm excited. I was a teacher coach, much like yourself. And I was teaching back a long time ago. So like when the movie The Incredibles came out, it was not kind to who John Chapman is when Syndrome, the character played by Jonah Hill, literally looked exactly like me. And so now you're around high school kids and they watch The Incredibles. It's a great movie. And so my nickname was Syndrome for years. So, you got to embrace it. So I would put the picture of Syndrome up, and I even dressed up as him as Halloween a lot of times. And like the kids loved it. But yeah, talking doppelgangers. Syndrome. That's who I was. But anyway, this has been a lot of fun. And you guys, if you are watching and still listening, or however you consume this content, you are the gold helmet of supporters, and we just want to say thank you. Head over to the 49ers Cutback, check out his show, hit subscribe. I'm excited about that episode tomorrow. And until next time, thank you, Ant, for your time, and everybody else, stay strong, faithful.